You already know what it is. Welcome to Third Degree Vibes, where real women have real conversations about life, love, career, and all the crazy ish happening in the world right now.
We're smart, we're bold, we're fly, and we say the things you're already thinking.
So grab your drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Because we got degrees, we got opinions, and we got no filters. Period. Today's episode is personal. We're talking about being adopted, identity, and rewriting your own story.
And trust, it's not what y'all think. There's power in being chosen, and today we're owning that.
This one's for the girls who grew up feeling othered. We're about to flip that script. Period. Hey y'all.
Hey,
How y'all doing today?
doing good, doing
We are
good.
doing marvelous on this
Blessed.
Thursday
Absolutely.
afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
I do agree. So today, I am so excited to finally sit with you all to share your stories with the world. You've shared them with me. I think they're remarkable. I already think you guys are remarkable women. So I am so blessed to be here today to facilitate this with you two. Are you guys ready?
Yep,
Absolutely.
ready.
Okay. So
This
I'm going to start off today talking to Adrienne.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're basically going to do ping pong. So the questions will be from both of your perspectives, same question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is, when did you find out you were adopted, Adrienne? And how did it shape your identity from that moment?
Well, you know what's so crazy? I guess we should mention that both me and Sheila were adopted.
Mhm.
Um, Now I was basically aware from the beginning. When I was adopted as a toddler, not an infant. So I was about 2.5 before I was actually placed in home with my mother. Um, but she was a single mom. She was actually one of the first Black women in the state of California to be allowed to adopt as a single mom. And we were on the news, we were, in different stories and whatnot. So it was sort of a big deal for her family. And so I was always aware. I was always aware that I was adopted. Um, I will say that, we'll probably get into more of this in a moment, but um, until I was, like in those rebellious years, when you're a teenager and whatnot, I really didn't, I wasn't bothered so much by it. Um, you know, you think about what could be or what, you make this whole, or at least I did. I made up this whole story in my head of what could have led up to me being put up for adoption, and maybe sometimes thinking about what my life would have been um were I not with my mother. But I had I knew from the beginning.
And Sheila, same question. When did you find out you were adopted and how did it shape your identity from that moment?
well, I didn't have the storybook thing like Adrian had. Mine was a hot comb moment. My mom was hot combing my hair one morning before I was going. I was actually we had just moved to Georgia and I was getting ready to go to middle school for the first time. Um, and she was pressing my hair and she was like, um, did you know that you were adopted? And I'm like, well, if you didn't tell me, how am I supposed to know? So, but I'm gonna say there had been like like rumors or like little stuff going around because my dad was from South Carolina and my mom was from Texas, so we would travel back and forth between the summers to each.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousins used to be like, "Oh my God, you don't look like us. Like you're this, you're that."
Wow.
Um, so they would say things like, "Oh, they found you under a kitchen sink somewhere," and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, "Oh Lord!" And every time I would ask my parents about it, because they were like very closed mouthed, did not want to have no conversations about it. Even after my mom told me, it was something that neither one of them wanted to talk about because I'm going to say I was a chosen child because my parents didn't think that they could have kids. Had tried for several years, and my mom didn't get pregnant, so they decided to adopt. They were in Texas, and they the story that my dad got, it was a young lady that was in college, maybe playing basketball, couldn't take care of the child, and she wanted to make sure the child went to a good family. So the stigma with adoption back then was totally different. The child had to stay in the house for about a year, and make sure that it was a good fit for the parents and for the child. And I think that, kind of like Adrienne, when after you find out, then you just have so many questions. Who am I? Who do I look like? Um, but the blessing for my situation is I never felt like I didn't belong because my parents, you're the oldest, you got to figure it out. You got to keep an eye on everybody. But it was
Right.
actually my sister that did all the fighting, and I would do all the talking and she would do all the backup. So,
Mhm.
but I think that it affects your life in profound ways because like you're always searching for answers.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not going to tell you this part right now, but the profoundness is after you get the answers, like how that makes you feel. I think that was my story, like how I felt after I found out who I
Mhm.
think that my adoptive parents were. It was kind of almost too late to kind of do certain things,
Mhm.
um, because of I waited out of respect for my parents to really start looking after they passed, to really start looking and researching where I came from. I had been on sites, but it didn't really give me the information because also the time that I was adopted, most adoptions were sealed. You
Mhm.
know, a lot of people weren't running to other countries to adopt kids, and they would just, young teenage mothers would have kids or, get pregnant and then be in a position that their families would be like, oh, no, you're not going to keep the child, or we're going to give the child up for adoption. And they would not hear anything else about the adoption after the child was
Mhm.
placed. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it was the same here. It was closed.
yeah.
Um, although I'll tell you, there was a moment when I was really young. I wasn't a toddler or anything, but a really young child. And I remember finding some papers that my mother had. In my mind, I think it was in the dining room. It was in some box or whatever. And I found these papers, and I remember knowing that it was my birth certificate, but it had a different name on it, right? And I think I asked her about it. I'm not sure, this is so long ago. Um, and that turned out to that's exactly what it was. I found out many, many years later that was my birth certificate and that was my birth name. But when I saw that name, I was try to identify with it, because just like you just said, you're searching for answers whether you know it or not. I mean, everybody wants to belong, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
And my family never, I mean, I'm not the only adopted child in my family, for one. I have two other cousins that were adopted, and I'm trying to think of, am I leaving anybody else out? Actually, three cousins that were adopted, and they were adopted after me. They actually used my crib. My mother gave them my crib, and I remember her passing it down to them. But like you asked how this forms your identity. Um, I was talking with just some random person the other day, and he was telling me about his name, and that his twin sister has a similar name. And I was telling him it was really funny because his name was Stefan, but he's always been called Stephen. And I said, "Oh, my husband's name is Stephen. His name's Stephen, and my middle name is Stephanie because my mother's name was Stephanie." And in that moment, I realized, how connected um I, my identity was to my mother who raised me, because and her family, because my first name, Adrienne, my grandmother gave me that. She was going to name one of her children Adrienne and wound up not doing that. So she named my first name, but my middle name was my mother's name. So, and I was just marveling at that when I was talking with this gentleman. So yeah, it's just like Sheila said, you know, you're trying to navigate this, and still your family's your family, right?
Exactly. Yep. No matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No matter what.
So, Adrienne, what's the biggest misconception that you think people have about adopted kids that you wish folks would let go of?
Well, I know we'll get into some more of my story in maybe a little bit, but I could tell, and this is not when I was growing up, because I don't think I shared that with too many people that I was adopted. I mean, again, I didn't just identify as being an adopted child, right? But later on, I got the impression from close family and friends and even my husband that in a way they felt sorry for me. And it was like, you feel sorry for me. And you know, just like me and Sheila were just saying, you know, you're searching, you want to know your identity, your lineage, and all of this. But I was adopted into an amazing family, and I benefited from that. And later on came to realize that it was not a disadvantage. It was nothing to feel sorry for me at all. I mean, they were this family and friends were close friends. And my husband were kind of really upset with my birth parents. And I'm like, no. I I did not see it that way. And I didn't want them to feel like they had to have that type of feeling about the whole situation. So I guess to answer to your question, to feel like to feel sorry for this adopted child, where no, the whole point for many adoptions is to put that child in a better situation.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And Sheila, same question. What's the biggest misconception that you feel like people have about kids?
I think for me, the biggest misconception is family is family. Like my parents that raised me, that's my family, even though the other people are my family as well. But like I had a wonderful childhood. I got to travel the world. You know, by the time I was 12, my dad was a military officer. So we, got to see things and experience things that most kids hadn't experienced at that point in time. Um, and for me, I really came from a family of love and togetherness. And I was the oldest, so I had a younger and sister and brother that I had to kind of protect. But, family is family, that no matter what. And those bonds will never be broken, whether you get reconnected with your biological parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I never wanted, out of respect for my parents, I never wanted them to feel like like we didn't do a good job. Why is she looking for somebody else? And it was never that, because like they did an amazing job, if I say so myself. Um, but
They did.
but you just always have to like I said, I mean, like I tried to do everything respectfully after they passed to even still carry on their legacy and make sure that everybody knows, like Charles and OC, that's my parents, and they did everything and put me in positions to excel
Mm-hmm.
for my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really good, really good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Adrienne, do you remember a moment when you felt different growing up, and how did you navigate that?
Well, like I said, I mean, it was for me kind of these tumultuous teenage years where I just, you know, I see my granddaughter doing it now. You know, they're preteens, and they just they want to have their own identity, right? So I wanted to be different at this point. And I was like, I am the name that I told you was on my birth certificate. I was trying to identify with that and, you know, be this person, I guess. And so it was more of a teenage rebellious time. It wasn't, it was, and at that point, you're just using whatever you got, whatever ammunition you got. I mean, for my son, when he went through that period of time, it was about his ADD, right? So he was using that as ammunition against me. So when, you know, when you go through those teenage years, you know, you're just, you know, you're out of sorts.
Right.
Because I never within my family felt different. I mean, even years, just a few years ago, one of my cousins, and by the way, big family, right? Big family I was adopted into. I mean, I have so many cousins, I don't even know how many there are. The grandparents had 6 children. One of my aunts had 6 children. I mean, you know, these are huge network of family, right? And I just remember a few years ago talking with my cousin, and we had never really connected like that. You know what I mean? He was one of my older cousins, right? We were kind of the younger generation. And but he wasn't really well. And we just wound up talking a lot. I remember going to a family reunion and we sat down, and we were talking. And right after that, we just were talking on a regular basis all the time. And when I was talking to him, my husband would be like, how is it that you guys are connecting now? And I'm like, you know, we have shared experiences. It's not hard. You know what I mean? Like the way we were raised, in the church that we were raised in, and the family rituals and routines that we came to do all those years. So we had this shared, it was not hard to talk to him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that would not be the same with somebody who I hadn't gone through that with, you know?
Right.
And so I don't know if I answered your question, but I just came to appreciate that. I really just did, because in that moment, because I don't know if I think I've told both of you that when the story progresses and there was this reuniting with a birth parent, I kind of lost my identity then. And I remember saying to my sister and to my aunt, because they were very inquisitive, you know, how what does this feel like? What is it? I said, you know what? It is really hard. I felt like, I don't know if you ever felt like this, Sheila, but I felt like in that moment, I was adopted again as an adult. I mean, I was really lost. I was
Yeah.
like, who am I now? You know what I mean?
And you don't expect that feeling, but it
Mm-mm.
just pops up out of nowhere because you're like, okay, I found
Yeah,
myself again. But
right.
now it's like, it can't be the same thing with different people. I mean,
It was confusing to me. It was
yeah.
very confusing to me. And to boot, someone who I had identified as a father figure had just passed, like very recently before that. And
Yeah.
so I just didn't, I just got lost, and I was like really confused and kind of just I don't know. I just at that point I didn't know what my identity was. And that was confusing for me, very much so.
I think another a really good point that you made, Adrienne, is like finding yourself, because when I think the like when you're younger, like you have all these questions and like you just think your life is going to magically change and that you're going to your adoptive
Mm-hmm.
or like the parents that let you go from adoption are going to be like these rich people that have all these mansions and stuff, and they're going to
Yeah.
throw money at you, and
Yeah.
that wasn't it.
Mm-mm.
But it was like, okay, like you feel like you open up a Christmas gift, but there's nothing in the box.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're excited, like,
Yeah.
and I think the thing that was the hardest for me is because I decided to do the ancestry test.
Mm,
Um, and that was like a whole another ball of wax.
mm-hmm,
But I'm gonna say my cousin Mike in California,
mm-hmm.
he was the person I reached out to his daughter, like, hey, can you help me? I mean, like I literally sent the same exact message to hundreds of people. Hey, I'm looking
Wow.
for my biological family, and I was born da 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 da, and this is where I was born at. And then
Mhm,
the preconceived perceptions that I had of nationality, what was, based on where I was born at, and all the other stuff. When
mhm,
I got my ancestry results,
mhm.
literally, I was at work and I started crying.
Whoa.
And I'm not going to say it on here why, but y'all ask me why after we get off of the thing. I literally was like, oh my goodness. Woo.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and not necessarily that it was a bad thing, but
Yeah.
like you're just so confused because I'm like,
Right?
there is no way, no way. Um,
And
so
Sheila,
then,
is that because you've had like this, like you said, this picture, like I was talking about earlier, have this, in my mind, I must have made up this whole story about,
yes,
you know,
yes,
all
exactly.
of that.
Yes.
And it's just because you are searching for, you want to fill in those blanks, right?
Who you look like, who you have
Right.
the similar, like when my kids do something, I'd be like, he just like his daddy. He did the same thing. But when you're adopted, you're like, who do I do something like? But
Yeah.
you know what's funny? My mom, like my youngest daughter,
Hmm.
my mom would always say, "Oh, she looked just like cousin Ida." Da, 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 da. And
Hmm.
I'm like saying, "How does she look like her? We don't even know who that is." But she really could have looked like her,
Yeah.
um, just based on the part of Texas that we were in.
Uh-huh.
But like to me, the other disappointing thing is when I really, before I did the ancestry test and I just started going on websites that were specific to Texas,
Hmm.
it was so confusing.
Mm,
I mean, you're just constantly going in circles to try to figure out information. And um, it was just kind of disappointing because,
mhm,
people don't want to help. Like, there's family secrets. There was no Netflix and chill. It was just chill. There's
mhm,
some secrets that have gone to the grave.
mhm,
And even my biological mom passed away a few weeks ago.
mhm.
Um, and
That's
there
right.
were still questions like I would kind of try to ask her stuff. And she said, "Oh, baby, don't worry about that. Like, oh, it's, done and gone with. Like, I'm just so glad that we found each other. But I
Mhm,
still got questions. There's stuff that I still, based on my tree, and I sent it to my uncle
mhm.
yesterday, as a matter of fact, and he didn't respond back to it. So I'm like, wait a minute.
Wow.
Do you need to tell me something, sir?
Uh-oh.
So I still got questions.
So
Um,
wait.
Quiet.
Okay, so I gotta say something here. Okay, because I want to go back to a question Krissy asked a moment ago, like the first question, right? No, the
uh-huh,
second question. The biggest misconception. Let me just clear something up here because for me, the biggest misconception I want to clarify
uh-huh.
is that every adopted child is looking for their birth parents.
Yeah,
And
that's not, yeah.
right now for Sheila, that
Uh-huh.
is true. She did search for
Yeah.
her parents. And
Mhm.
for me, that is not the case. And I'll tell you, when I was growing up with my adopted mom, she indicated that she would kind of be hurt, kind of like what you said, Sheila. She really didn't want me to look, and that was, or she gave me that impression that she didn't really want me to look, and that stuck with me. And
Right.
so my whole life, family, friends, my husband, even my own kids were like, "Are you ever gonna look? Are you ever gonna look?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I no." I mean, I had gone through quite a few things in my life that were traumatic and very hard, and I just didn't want to open Pandora's box because I felt like, I watched all those shows, the adopted shows that they put on. I watched Finding Your Roots every week.
Right.
But but I
One of
also
my favorite
realized,
shows.
right?
Plug.
But y'all know that they just put on the really good outcome, right?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, now we live, well, I guess the past decade we've been in this reality world, so people do want to see drama, but for the most part, before then, everybody wanted to see it all tied up with a bow and looking pretty. So I felt like, that might not be everybody's story, and I just didn't want to go searching for any trouble. So that was my deal. And people just presume in a better answer to your question there would have for me been just to assume that everybody's looking. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. It definitely wasn't the case with me.
Yeah, because they don't, a lot of people, I mean, I'm going to say I was blessed that
Mm-hmm.
the people that I was looking for, I'm not going to, they said that they were looking for me. And I know that there's so much red tape because their records are sealed and all the other stuff, and you have to get attorneys. But I think that the laws in Texas have changed since then. But before I even started like the ancestry stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I'm there's a young lady that I worked with when I lived in Georgia, and she went to knock on the door of her biological father, and he
Mm-hmm.
stepped out, and she was like, "Hey, I'm your daughter." And he stepped outside, and he was like, "Please do not come to my house again.
Whoa.
Nobody does not know about you." So like that was a fear that I had searching for my biological parents, because I'm like, what if they don't want to see me? What if they, put me up? And
Yeah.
then I also heard horror stories even from my situation, because my mom was really young. She married this guy like 2 months before I was born, and he said, "Oh, if you just put her up for adoption, we'll have other kids."
Mm,
And they had other kids, and then that situation didn't work out. So
mm,
I'm like, I want to, and he's still on this side of the earth, and I
yeah.
want to have a conversation with him, because like I want to know like why, and
Mm-hmm.
he might have a different perspective than
Mm-hmm.
my mom had. So like I want to hear it, because like now I think I'm at a point that I'm not gonna cuss him out, not gonna act crazy or nothing like that, but I want to know like why.
Why?
But then
Yeah.
I say, if I want to know why, like Adrienne, you said you came from a big family. My mom's side of the family, that the mom that raised me, she
Mm-hmm.
had 11 sisters and brothers. My dad
Whoa.
had 12 sisters and brothers, and then we found out it was more after my grandfather passed away.
Wow.
So I have hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
first, second, third, fourth,
Mm-hmm.
whatever cousins,
Mm-hmm.
and still have a lot of. I have two aunts that are still living and three uncles that are still living. On
Wow.
my dad's side and on my mom's side, I only have one auntie left.
Mm-hmm.
But so large, super large families. And then I think like nobody ever treated me different. I was always
Mm-hmm.
included in everything. And of course, they knew
Mm-hmm.
because they were there, when my
Yeah.
parents adopted. And my dad never said anything about me being adopted until my oldest daughter. They thought that she had a trait of sickle cell.
Mm.
So I'm like, if for nothing else,
Yeah.
medically, I want to know what's
Yeah.
going on with me.
Right.
And he was like, "Oh," and he hated like it. It would like break his heart to tell me stuff, because like I'm his daughter. He raised me. He
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
came to my track meets. He came to all my basketball games. He was like
Mm-hmm.
there. He was,
Mm-hmm.
had this super heavy job, but he found ways to show up for us, like no matter what.
Right.
And
You know, what you just said, I mean, it's we have so many similarities, even though there's some differences in our
um,
story, because it does that component, your children. When
mhm,
was pregnant with my first son, my first child, I felt the need to get some information. I didn't know.
Yeah.
anything medically. And by then, my adopted mom had passed away. She passed away before I graduated from high school, and so I didn't know anything. And I was concerned about my baby, like, what am I passing on? I don't even know.
Yeah.
And so I did some research, went back to the adoption agency, and like you said, all the records are sealed.
Yep.
However, if there were, they have medical information, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was they set up a meeting with me. I remember going with my husband at the time, and us going in and them giving me information that was in that file medically without giving any identity away or names or anything. And so I found out the particulars, just like your situation. My parents were very young. They were in high school. And there were certain things like, I don't know if I ever told you guys, I was born with extra fingers. Did I tell you that?
No.
Yes. I was born with extra fingers and they were removed. There was no bone, so they were removed. And all three of my children have extra fingers, and one of them had extra toes. And it's something between all three of us that, or what, four of us, all four of us, that just brings us together. It's not something we're ashamed of or anything like that. But when my middle son was in the hospital, everybody was coming to the hospital to see his extra fingers and toes, and I didn't like that. But
Wow.
but but I found out the medical information, and I wanted them to stop after that. I really didn't want any more information than that.
Okay.
And so, but I just thought I'd comment on that because, yeah, it in that moment, I needed to know some stuff, you
Well,
know.
both of you guys have children, so I'm wondering, like, how did your kids react to? I mean, did they know that you were adopted originally? Like, did they wait grow up knowing this, or was it something that they found out later on? And how did they react to the situation?
Well, I don't know about Sheila, but like I said, my adopted mom had passed away before I graduated from high school, so she never, unfortunately, never got to meet any of her grandchildren.
Right.
And that makes me sad. It really does make me sad. So consequently, there were no grandparents on my side of the family for my children. And so I would talk about my mom, my adopted mom, of course, to my children, but they of course never met her and don't know very much about her. But just like I was told from the beginning that I was adopted, I felt like they should know that as well. And it affected our relationship, me and my three children, because for me, that was the only blood family that I know for sure. You know what I
Right.
mean? For the
Right.
majority of my life, those people that came out of this person are the only blood family that I know.
Right.
And so I just have always been super close to my children. It's always been, whenever, even when there were tough times, when I went through my divorce from my first husband, it was a very hard time. And financially, psychologically, all these things, but it was us against the world. You know what I mean? This was this was my tribe. So um yeah, they knew.
Right.
Absolutely, they knew. Yeah.
And my kids, I did not tell them until they were older. Only again for out of respect for my parents. My parents not only did everything for me, my sister, my brother, but they did everything for my kids as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that was all they ever knew was my parents. And like Adrienne said, going to church and
Mm-hmm.
having the foundation of um, morals and community service and just being a good person. I hold all those attributes to my parents because that was the things that they instilled in us.
Right.
And that's the things that, I think that I was able, because my parents were just so amazing, that was the things I was able to pass down to them. But yeah, once, like you said, Adrian, like once you have your kids, like you feel like, okay, this is all me.
Yeah.
So it don't matter whatever else is going on, like
Mhm.
I'm make sure. And my
Yeah.
kids to this day look out for me if I whatever I need, want,
Mhm.
they're like, okay, we're gonna make it happen. You
Yep.
need to go here, okay, we're gonna make it happen. You need this, we're gonna make it happen. And I love and appreciate that for them because I feel like that's the how I raised them to be.
Right. Right. No, it's a thread that runs through because I mean we were talking before the show about me losing my dog over the this week and then being reunited and finding him. I mean, one of the first calls I got was my middle son to say, "Okay, do this, do that," because he knew I would be freaking out. You know
Oh
what I mean?
yes.
He knows
Yeah.
his mom. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, mom, it's gonna be fine. They're gonna do this, and this. So, and there were, this happens all the time. If they're gonna come see about their mom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So cool.
That's called being a good mom.
Hey, I'll
They
take
give
it.
Amen.
it comes back to you. So,
Amen. Oof.
so Adrian, what superpower do you think adoption gave you that you wouldn't trade for anything?
Wait a minute. Excuse me. Say it again.
What superpower do you think adoption gave you that you wouldn't trade for anything?
Um. Well, I would say family, appreciating family. Because, like me and Sheila was just saying a moment ago, the connection that we had to our children. And I'm not saying that wouldn't have been there anyway. It's not just because I'm adopted, but it had a real significance to me, um, having my children, um, and just wanting them to always be connected to me. You know what I mean? I didn't want to have another broken link. Okay. Um, I just the sense of family and just knowing. I mean, even when I was raising them, it was ever present in my mind that they were only going to be with me this number of years and then they were going to be on their own, and you know what I mean, they won't be living and I wouldn't see them every single day.
Okay.
And it was I just had this in my mind to appreciate this time with them, not to say that, you know, not every day was I sitting there staring at them thinking, oh, you're so wonderful, I'm so glad to have this moment with you. No, not every day. But but I knew that there was going to be a time where, we wouldn't be under the same roof and they would have their own lives, and it wouldn't be every day that I would be able to talk to them and share things with them and just be with them. So that's what I think it did for me. Yeah.
What about you, Sheila? What is your superpower from
I
being
think
in?
my biggest superpower is acceptance. Like there's just the journey that I went on with my parents and my family. Um, our house was the house that everybody came to. Everybody, kids, adults. If you needed something to eat, if you needed a place to stay, this was the house that was going to happen in.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, from when we were little, my dad and mom wanted one of our cousins to come and stay with us. And I'm not going to say her name because my other cousins might be like, wait a minute, he told me that too. But I remember few years ago, she was like, man, Uncle Tank tried to get me to come live with y'all. And like, I really wish I would have did it. I see how much my life would have been different. And I'm like, that made me feel good because I know that my parents were good people and that they went above and beyond, not just for us, but for our their nieces and nephews, my aunties, if they ever needed anything, my uncles, whatever. They were always there, always approachable, always accepted a situation. Um, my friends of ours that needed to stay with us, My parents are like, okay, we got extra room. They can come stay in the room. And countless of people can say, I lived at, I'm not going to put my address out there, but that. And the refrigerator was always full. There was always going to be something to eat. Whatever they were going to do, I was included in it. So acceptance is my superpower.
That's good.
It sounds to me that both of your experiences parallel each other. And it sounds to me that, like you said earlier, that some people try to pity you or think it's a bad thing that you were adopted. But insight, I see that it was somewhat of a gift for both of you because a lot of times I believe that the Most High moves for what's best for each of his children.
Oh, yeah.
So while you later on want to maybe, you yearn for the identification of who you are, or just the clarification, basically, you want to know things. You were given like supreme gifts that a lot of people don't have even with their own biological parents. So that's something that you really, I'm sure you are, but 'cause you said that, but that's something to be very grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Adrienne, how has being adopted impacted how you show up in your relationships? I think we kind of covered this talking about your kids, but your relationships, your friendships, motherhood, how has that impacted?
Well, yeah, I did mention about, the closeness to my children that I feel, like um I don't think I share this with them, but in my mind, I know that whenever the Lord calls me home, they will not ever have to question how their mother felt about them. Not one moment. Not one moment, because I say it. I say it all the time. They know they need me. Okay, first of all, don't call me if you don't need me because I am going to show up. Okay.
Right.
This is the cavalry over here. So be ready. Okay. So they know this about their mother. Okay. So I am ever present when they need me. I try not to hover or be one of those kind of moms or whatever. I let them live their life and be the fathers and the adults that they are, because I've raised them, just like Sheila said, I've raised them to be those strong individuals, those strong people. So I need to trust that they are going to make whatever mistakes they're going to make, but they're also going to make those good decisions. But I will say, with some of my friendships, I've had moments when I've been able to, they all know that I'm adopted. If you're close to me, you knew I was adopted because, like I said, I didn't keep it. But I've had moments when I would tell my friends when they were having difficult moments with their parents, I would be able to kind of give them perspective from their parent side of things. You know what I mean? And to appreciate their parent, because I didn't, even with my adopted mom, after going through all those tumultuous teen years and the disappointments that I know that I gave her, I didn't get a chance to fully say, I'm sorry, mom. You did a magnificent job raising me. And I didn't get to tell her that to her face. So I've had friendships with close friends where I tell them those things, and they've been able to go and have those moments with their parents to apologize for anything that they felt like they needed to apologize while their parent is still on this side of the earth, like Sheila just said. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
And appreciate them now and not regret later not having said those things. So I think it's impacted those friendship as well. I would say it impacts me in everything, because it's a part of who I am. It's a part of me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And Sheila, how has it impacted you, your relationships, motherhood, friendship?
I think that the same with Adrian. People come to you and complain about, oh, my mom did this and my dad said this, and when you, I think it affects the way you show up for people because there's certain things that you know that you can't take for granted because you're not in the same situation. So if you, like my parents, we travel, I mean, to this day, we do things as a cohesive unit. If my brother's going to have something at his house, we're going to drive the 2.5 hours. My sisters and my niece are going to drive the 4 hours to come together. We're going to do that. And then when I take pictures of family stuff, we know that there's going to be 26 to 28 of us showing up, and we plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and everybody can't deal with that. That's not everybody's cup of tea,
Mm-hmm.
and I respect that. But if you're gonna be around me, you need to be. There's gonna be loud. It's gonna be kids. It's gonna be adults. It's gonna be everybody because everybody's included,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody's left behind. And
Mm-hmm.
we have that kind of like that motto. I've been sick for the last couple of years, and my sister has gone out of her way to make sure I'm okay. I have stuff if I need stuff. My brother has gone out of his way and his family. If I need stuff, my kids have gone out of their way to make sure that I'm okay. And like that's to me, that's the biggest takeaway in life. Like you don't leave anybody behind. Everybody got to have a seat at the table, no matter what.
I agree. And that is the meaning of family because, you can easily, like my dad and I were talking last week, and he was saying, I was agreeing with him that there's a difference. You have relatives and then you have family. And family can sometimes be your friends, like you two. I consider you family. It's about the action, not so much the blood, and
Yeah.
in that I kind of want to ask you guys, have you had an experience? Have you connected with your birth family? And let's start off with Adrienne.
So, yeah, yes. Okay. Okay.
Can I say, here we go?
Yeah.
Here we
Here
go.
it is. So it was a very interesting situation. Like I said, staying true to what I said before, I was very adamant about not looking for my birth parents. I felt some kind of way. I felt like my adopted mom, even though she's passed away, it was disrespectful to her. And Sheila kind of alluded to that as well. But so I never did do any type of searching. I would think about it. My kids would bring it up. My husband would bring it up. Everybody around me would bring it up. And I made it very clear to them to stop asking me. You know what I mean? And so it was a holiday. I want to say like a Memorial Day or something, a long weekend. And we had gone to my husband's aunt and uncle. They live in Northern California. We had gone up there for a visit. They have acreage, and it's kind of like a dude ranch for me, for this Southern California girl who doesn't know what a dude ranch looks like. Um, but I love going up there and getting away. Even the Wi-Fi doesn't work where they live. So we had come back and I noticed that there was mail in our mailbox. And I was just, fussing at my daughter in my head that she couldn't be bothered to take the mail out of the mailbox. And so I'm grabbing the mail and there's this letter addressed to me. And my husband went around the side of the house or whatever, so he wasn't in the same room with me. I'm opening this letter and I literally screamed. And I fell into the chair. Luckily the chair was nearby because I would have fell to the floor. This letter was from a man who was looking for his birth daughter. And he said he'd been looking for many years and that he recently had hired a person who, this is what they did, was search for adopted children. And she had immediately identified that I was probably this person. And so in the letter he was asking, to let him know if, I mean, he gave like birth date around the right date. The year was right. And he had signed his name. And my husband, of course, came running in the room after I screamed, and I showed him the letter, and he was like just astounded. And so I started asking my husband questions. What should I do? What should I do? What's going on? And I said, do you think he's on Facebook? And he said, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, do you think he's looked at me on Facebook? Now I had just gotten on Facebook because I had a childcare like you, Krissy, and I didn't want those parents in my business all those years. I don't want to go get a margarita and have them talk about me on Monday morning. So I just had gotten on Facebook, and I said, do you think he's looked to see if I'm on Facebook? And he said, well, most people do. So I went to Facebook and I looked up this person. Remember, he signed the letter, and he was. So I'm looking at this picture and I'm going, this is true. And the reason why I knew was because he had freckles, and I have freckles that I try to hide under layers of makeup because I hate my freckles. And I was like, oh my goodness. But what was really astounding was this, you know how under Facebook it says you have mutual friends? It said we had a mutual friend. And I was like,
Oh,
wow. This is starting to get freaky. No way. And so I clicked on it, because you can click on it, and it brought up my cousin Ronnie. Now, my cousin Ronnie is one of my older cousins, like the cousin I was talking about earlier. So, like, he was grown by the time I was adopted. You know what I mean? He was in the service and all that. So, but he was close to my mom and everything. So I called him, and we're sort of close. Like I'll call him regularly. So I called him and I said, Ronnie, yeah. I gave him the whole rundown of the story. And he said, I said, do you know this person? What's really going on? And he says, yeah, we went to school together. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah. He said, I've seen him at the reunions and this and that. And I'm like, really? He said, yeah, we talked at the reunions and what have you. And I'm like, really? And I said, Ronnie, what year did you graduate? And he said, I'm about to give you, spoiler alert, here's my age. He said, I graduated in 1965. And I said, Ronnie, I was born in 1965. And he said, I had no idea that this person had a baby or anything. Because just like Sheila was saying earlier, you know, it's a different time, right? So my birth mother had to go away for a minute, right? This was not something that was considered, this was scandalous. It was frowned on. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't have any idea. And so long story long, I wind up in the letter. He said, if this isn't you, please just let me know so I can continue my search. Okay. So by the evening, after talking with Ronnie and after calling my last living uncle, I had the courage to call the person in the letter. So I called, and I'm asking all the questions that are running through your head right now, just like Sheila was saying. I'm asking, who are you? Who was she? Did you love her? You know, all the things that you really want to make the story right
in your head.
Right. Yes. In my head. Right. Yes. Because now everything's contradicting that whole story that I made up. Remember?
Exactly. Yep.
So he says, well, and he was trying to be very honest. So he said, you know, as much as we thought we loved each other, I mean, they were kids, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we get into these conversations and what have you. And, you know, I'm sharing with him that I have 3 children, 3 grown children. I'm married, been married for, I don't know, what was it, 20 some years by then, and this and that and the other. And so then I'll just go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought you said something. I'm sorry.
No, I think it was feedback.
We wind up meeting. We met at a Mexican restaurant. I love Mexican food. You guys know that. So we met at this Mexican restaurant, and I have this picture that my husband took when we first met each other. Now, by this time I've told my kids. My kids were like, especially my oldest son and my younger daughter were like, yeah, no, until there's a DNA, we're not even going to go there, mom. You need to make sure. And they were very protective of their mom. They were like, what? They were like, how? No, 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 no. We need some hard evidence here. And so we did wind up taking that DNA test, and that DNA test you could get at freaking Rite Aid nowadays. And it was 98.9999, something crazy. It was so obvious. It was ridiculous. And um, so it began. And now this point, you have to understand I'm 50 some years old. Okay. So as I said, I've been married. My children are grown. I have grandchildren even at this point. So the relationship to a birth parent, in my mind, should have been getting where you fit in. Okay. Because I no longer need a parent at 50 some years old. Can we agree?
Amen.
Come on now. Come on.
Amen.
So, but I've been told since then, through therapy, by the way, that some people, when they go through a trauma like giving up their child, when it comes to that, they might be stuck in that part of their life mentally.
Absolutely. Right? I agree with that statement.
And come to find out, my birth father had never been married, didn't have any other children throughout his life. So I was it. So he, got it in his mind that he needed to be this parent after 50 plus years. And that just doesn't even make sense. Okay. No. He also had some conception that he was going to find me and save me from, can I say it? Can I say it? Some ghetto life where I had some rugrats running around. And this man's very intelligent, right? So I looked at him and said, can you count? Like, how does that even make sense? Right? My kids would be grown no matter what. And I was a young mother. You guys know that. So I was a young mother. So they were well grown by this time, 30s. You know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, no. And he was even resistant to the fact that I was married. And not only that, he had some reasoning in his own mind that he would be referring to me by that name that I told you was on my birth certificate.
Wow.
So it just started to be a difficult situation. And I already told you I was having identity issues behind all this. So him not respecting that my name is Adrienne and him not respecting that I'm married because he's trying to deal with his own issues just weren't working. I think I told you guys that at some point he suggested that he should adopt me. And I was like, I think you can adopt grown folks. Can you, he said, oh, you can, blah, blah. So apparently he looked into it. I said, well, can I explain to you that I am married? So even if you adopt me, and which is not going to happen, now I'm really feeling like my mom would be disrespected, right? I'm like, this is crazy. No, and my name will still be Bradley. You got that, right? I mean, so anyway, as I said, he was dealing with his own issues of guilt, that and the other. He tried to convince himself that I had found him and I had to set him straight on the actual events. I said, no. Let's be clear. I was not looking for you or her. Okay, let's not flip the script now. That's not what happened. Oh, but I felt like you were looking for me and you felt like I said, that's not true. That's just not true.
Right.
And I've had a good life. So I appreciate you for that. But my name is Adrienne. Okay. And more to Adrienne Bradley. And Adrienne Bradley has had 50 plus years at this point of living this life. And he just couldn't really wrap his mind around that. I mean, he thought, like she was saying earlier, that as a child we think they're gonna swoop back in and they got all this money and they're gonna, and he thought that he was gonna do that. He and, and that was not gonna be the case. And he said, well, and I said, you see, maybe when my kids were younger,
Mhm.
and I was explaining to him, I said, no, I would have rather. He said, well, what moments, what would you wanted to share with me? I said, when I was married, when I got married, my wedding day, when I had my children, when my children were getting awards. And he said, oh, so you would have wanted to share moments with me. I'm like, that's what life is.
Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly.
So to wrap this all up, there came to a point of no return. And I informed him that I would not be communicating with him moving forward. And I appreciated his efforts, and it was nice to meet him, to find out about my lineage. I did find out a lot about that. I found out that my first cousin, his niece, get this, is named Adrienne.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So weird,
Wow.
spelled the same name and it's the same way and everything. But I had to sever that because it was not a healthy thing for me to be going through. This it's You guys know me, I'm gonna tell the truth, and I've said,
Yeah.
I've said in, I won't say where, I won't say who, but around family, and thought I would not be here if y'all weren't family.
I think a whole lot of people think like that.
You know what I
'Cause,
mean?
you be like,
And yeah, so at 50, if y'all don't know, who's ever listening to this, at past 50, that filter is gone, and Adrienne's filter was gone,
in the trash.
and I'm not swallowing it anymore. And I said, I wish you well, and yeah, it was nice to meet you. And I severed the relationship. And I considered over the last few years whether I was wrong. And this is before the pandemic, of course, and whether I was wrong, and this and that and the other. But I had to stay true to myself. And last year he passed away. And my son actually told me that he passed away. And I attended the services, and I didn't know how I was going to feel. And my children were there to support me. Of course, they're going through whatever they're going through as well, because they met him and their kids met him. And I stood over his body and I thanked him for my life. And I did not feel any guilt for not taking that relationship further. It had gone as far as it could go. And that's why I said earlier, to presume that the adopted child does not feel whole if they don't find their birth parent was not the case for me. So that's my story. I did connect with him. I will give a final beat here, and then we got to get to Sheila's story. But my birth mother, I believe, is still alive. I was told that she did try and find me at one point many years ago, but got cold feet and backed out. But she did get married and have other children. And I don't know if they know about Adrienne. Okay.
Right.
So I literally live in fear. I shouldn't say fear, but in anxious anticipation of somebody knocking on my door. Because, like I said, it's not hard to do. Sheila told you it's not hard to do a DNA test now.
Not in this day and age, no.
Stuff's being told. The secrets are coming out now because the DNA can talk. So I don't know if anybody on that side, and I mean anybody, grandkids, siblings, whoever, starts digging or dropping blood, I'm probably gonna come up.
It's gonna be a problem.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna bubble up to the top. So if she hasn't told them, and I don't think she has, I don't know. But so that's my story.
And Sheila, what about you?
So, of course, I told y'all I did the ancestry thing. So that will take you down a rabbit hole. So the hundreds of people that I've reached out to, I mean, I'm gonna say 99% of the people don't want to respond to you because they're just like, "What are you doing on my family tree?" They're confused. They're just as confused as I am. But I want to go back and touch on something. So the I found my biological father. And the way that I found him is like through like a second cousin, and then I was able to get talk to her dad, and that's the ones that live out in California. Um, and so the biological dad side was a whole lot easier to find because there was like, everybody was keeping good records and there was a whole lot of them, like probably 12 or 13 of them. So a lot. But the confusing part, I have somebody that popped up as a half sister, and I don't know from whom or when or where, but she lives in Louisiana. And I've talked to her on the phone several times. She took me down this rabbit hole of all these different people. And when I met the biological dad, you go through the thing where like I'm meeting cousins and nieces and nephews and aunties and all these other people. So I met, I guess, my half brother, and his first words he wasn't talking directly to me, but indirectly said, "Where did I come out the woodwork from?" But I had to directly let him know, "Baby, I'm
Wow.
older than you, so I wasn't coming out of the woodwork. I was already in the woodwork."
I am the
So,
woodwork. That.
yeah, exactly that part. But of course, that relationship did not with him, did not with the step brother, half brother, whatever he is, um, was not something that he wouldn't return any of my phone calls. He thought that I wanted money, and I'm like, it's not, that wasn't a reason that I was looking for my biological parents. Um, so I got to meet him one time, but we talked because I think this happened like just before the pandemic, so very similar, Adrian. And I got to talk to him, but now he's at the point that he has dementia and he doesn't even know who I am. So I'm like, do I continue to keep on reaching out to somebody that does not want to have anything to do with me, like the son? Because at this point, he's the dad is not going to even know who I am, and I can remember trying to figure out who the mom was, and he was sending me pictures, I guess, of all his ex-girlfriends. "Do you think she's the one?" I said, "I'm trying to call you and find out. How do I
What?
know? I wasn't there, sir." So literally sent me
Wow.
pictures of like three different women. And I'm
Mm-mm.
like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, what? He gave me names and everything. And at that point, he had a girlfriend living with him. And I guess she knew that he had kind of got to the point that he had dementia or was starting to get dementia.
Mm.
And she's like, "Why do you keep on calling him? You need to stop, blah, blah, blah." And I said,
Wow.
"Well, baby, I'm not calling to talk to you. I'm calling to talk to him. And as soon as he's answering my phone calls and calling me, we're going to have, going to be in communication with one another." So we did that and it kind of went nowhere. And I had this random person say, "Hey, I know you don't know me, and but I can figure out your through lines on Ancestry." And what
Mm.
that does is it basically connects you to everybody that you have a DNA match with. So if they have a drop of your blood and you have a drop of their blood, it's gonna pop up on the through lines.
Whoa.
When I say thousands of people, oh my gosh. I'm just like, I should probably know the tribe on that side. I should know the tribe in Africa that I came from. But I
Wow.
don't.
Right.
But it's that detailed.
Wow.
And every day I don't go on Ancestry like I used to, but anytime I go on there, it's like, "Oh, you have a new hint. Oh, this person is related to you." And literally, I'm like most people are in the United States, a mutt, but I'm like from Europe, from, you know,
Hmm.
Indian, different countries in Africa. I mean, just like a little bit of everything. The interesting part is like, you know how you meet people and you kind of like feel connected to not necessarily the person, but like the things that they do and like the ways that they have.
Hmm.
like I can see why I like certain things just based on my heritage, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
On the mother's side, that's a totally different story, you know, because I was trying to figure out, because literally it says it had mother still living, grandparents still living, but then like I guess the way that it went, I'm like, but there's not nobody that I'm finding out. And literally the dad's side of the family is basically who helped me kind of come up with an option.
Mhm.
I called this lady and I'm like started telling her my little story. And her her aunt answered the phone
Mhm.
and she literally, you know how like somebody calls you and they're like, and the lady's on the phone, she's not saying nothing. And I'm like, and I realized she's not talking. And I'm like, hello? And she said, hold on, baby, let me hand the phone to somebody.
Whoa.
She
Wow.
hands the phone to my mom and she said, I have been looking for you for so long. And like as an adopted person, that's like music to your ears in most
Right.
cases.
Right.
Um, but then there's always stuff that goes along with that. Because then you also get attached to other people's trauma.
Mm.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
and you don't realize I mean, like I've had a blessed life and continue to have a blessed life because of my parents that adopted me. The one good thing that I'm gonna say, awesome thing I'm gonna say is that my biological mother, I got to have, I'm not gonna say not necessarily a mother-daughter relationship with her, but like she became somebody that I talk to every day or text every day or FaceTime. And you know how sometimes God will put you or place you in an assignment
Yeah.
and not like I gotta do my homework assignment, but like an assignment like this is what I need you to do on behalf of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, I think that I filled a void, and if I
Yes.
didn't talk to her, if I didn't like reach out to her for something, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're mad at me," and like I
Oh,
felt guilty. Like I don't even know how to explain it. I felt guilty when she felt guilty because I
Mhm.
never wanted her to feel like that.
Mhm.
right.
Like I guess if I had a messed up life, I would have been like, kind of mad or jilted or
Right.
upset. But because I didn't have a bad life, I was not gonna, why did you give me up? And why did you, you know, have other kids after you had me? And because
Mhm.
that wasn't my place. That wasn't my assignment for her.
Mhm.
And unfortunately she passed in February.
Mhm.
Um and and I never got to meet her in person
Oh. Mm.
because I did go to Texas maybe a year and a half ago
Mhm.
because one of my other cousins on my parents that raised me side had passed away, and that was going to be my first time going to visit her. And
Mm.
so I spent the first 2 days with my family, and then the next day after the funeral, I was supposed to go meet her, and she didn't answer her phone.
Mm.
Literally, my heart broke. I'm like, I done came all the way from Virginia, and now this lady is not answering her phone.
Mhm. Why didn't she answer it?
She was in the hospital,
Oh.
and she had a UTI, and she was like, you know how like when older people get UTIs, they sometimes kind of get um not deranged, but like
Mhm.
she
Yeah.
wasn't in her right state of mind, basically.
Kind of some
Mhm.
kind of senility kind of.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Um, so I didn't get a chance to meet her. And
Mhm.
she's like, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. I can only imagine how you felt. And like I was almost mad for a minute because I'm like, wait a
Mhm.
minute. Like I didn't waited all these years to come see you.
Mhm.
And it wasn't her fault that she got sick. But
Right.
I did so, and I said, "Well, what hospital are you in?" And she was like, "Do not come up here and see me. I'm sick. I don't want you to see me like this."
Mhm.
And again, my assignment for her was not for me to be a thorn in her side. My assignment was to bring her closure, bring her joy, make her happy. And my so with my kids, they only Scott and Taj have talked to her and kind of formed a relationship with her.
Mm-hmm.
My daughters, I think that they're more loyal, and I know how close they were to my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I didn't force the relationship on them. I didn't, because like I didn't know how I was gonna feel. I didn't know what I was gonna expect or want or any of that.
Right.
So I said, rather than burden them, like, okay, do you want to have a relationship with her or don't? I just said, if
Mhm.
they ask me about it, I'll answer. If they want to meet her, I'll let them. Scott was open to it. Taj was definitely open to it. Scott had conversations with her. And then when she passed, it was almost like I feel sad because, of course, you feel sad when somebody passes away.
Mm-hmm.
But like when my mom passed away,
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't think I was. I think I was like out of it for like a month,
Mm-hmm.
like literally sitting outside, and my boss was like, "Yo, you can come back to work whenever. Like, take your time. We're not in a rush. Don't think you got to come back. I don't care what they say about time. Use your vacation time." And literally, I could not think straight, sleep, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I included my adopted mom. Scott and Taylor got married during the pandemic. She was on the Zoom. Anything that I could include her in that was like on Zoom or phone calls or whatever, I included her. And they didn't even know. But she, that gave her the closure that she needed to feel like, okay, she really was looking for me. She really doesn't hate me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not, I mean, that's not me anyway. But, but my assignment was completed with her.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
you are right. God does sometimes, in the most uh, uncomfortable situations, He has something for you to do, for His glory. And,
Exactly.
for you to be able to do that, it just reflects again your parents and how they raised you and the life that you were given as far as a gift. And sometimes as a test,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you could have been like, to
It could have
hell.
went so many
Yeah.
different ways. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's why I said my superpower is acceptance because at at I guess what she would consider her worst, she was yeah, I mean like she was I think like maybe 15 when she had me.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So 14 or 15 when she got pregnant or around that age group. Um so and I'm like looking at Taj like, yo, you took a bath today. Yo, make sure you brush your teeth before you leave out. Make your
Right.
bed up. Imagine having a baby at that young.
Right.
Right.
Oh
Exactly.
my goodness.
That's
No
correct.
way.
Too. And it's unlike your situation is unlike Adrian, where, she had humility in the situation.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
Where,
yeah.
Adrian's situation, it didn't seem like she was running into that. It seems like she was almost being rewritten. Her life had already been created. And then, it's just like if you have any person who comes in, a stranger, basically, who
Yeah.
Yeah.
comes in and they, attempt to rewrite you to say this, or this is your name, this is what you're doing, I want you to do this, and oh, and your husband doesn't exist. And,
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
they're going to take a different stance with that. But with her, it seems like she came to a place of like solvency where she was able to be okay. God knows, God knew she was going to be leaving this
Oh
earth.
yeah.
She left this earth. He needed her to be okay,
Oh
basically.
yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And I never so like when she passed, Adrian, you said something like your kids always make sure you're okay and they check on you because like the
Mm-hmm.
kids were like, "Ma, you just gonna go out to Texas? You don't even know nobody out there, and you gotta make sure you gonna be all right." And I'm like, "Who gonna check me? I'm gonna be fine." Like, look, I'm from Texas originally, so Texas gonna be Texas. It's not gonna be no issues. And there wasn't no issues. Everybody treated me like they knew me forever. I got to meet nieces and nephews and sisters and the whole nine.
Mm.
And we had great, deep intellectual conversations. And that's something, because I'm it was one thing having a relationship with the person that birthed you, but now you have all these other people, and you're like, okay, but how? Now you're asking God, like, how are these people supposed to fit my life?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that each relationship is gonna be different. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, one of the nephews, he's reached out to me a few times, and we've stayed in contact. I haven't stayed in contact with the nieces, but I think that's just, you're meeting somebody for the very first time, and how are you supposed to react, and what do you expect, and what's expected of you?
Right.
It's
Exactly.
kind of it's it's confusion.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Adrian,
Yeah.
what would you tell your younger self or another adopted or boy who's still trying to figure out where he or she belongs?
Um,
Your advice.
you are you're where you're supposed to be. You may have come into this world through another person or family, but the family around you, the family that loves you, the family that is there for you, it's so much more than blood. You know, it is that shared experience like I was talking about earlier. My cousins, even my older cousins, we all have these shared experiences. We're connected. We are family. And just like you said earlier, even your friends, you know, can be your family. I have friends that I'm closer to than family, you know. So, you know, you you are that's your identity. It's not because I told you earlier I watch Finding Your Roots whenever it's on. Both me and my husband watch. And they go back in the lineage and they find these ancestors 4 or 5, deep, right? And it's like it's information to be true, but you don't know those people,
Exactly.
right? The people who, like Sheila and I said, who are going to pick up the phone and make sure you're going to be okay going to another state. You know what I'm saying? I've traveled up to the Bay and had to take their public transit, and my daughter is literally like, put me on FaceTime, let me see where you're at. Okay, do this, do that. You know what I'm saying? This is my child.
And on the location on your phone, so we know you're okay.
Right? She's like, okay, don't do this, mom, don't do that. And and I'm like, okay. I mean, we literally flip roles at this point. So those things that I've been able to instill, and Sheila and I have been able to instill in our children, and same for you, Krissy, those things, that's our family. That's what our family instilled in us. And like I said, um, it was not to be disrespectful. It was not. Um, the fact that my story is different, and I think other people's story might be close to mine as well. You're curious, but my family, who I can talk to, who I buried, who I loved my whole life, that's my family.
Amen.
Adrienne, you and I talked about that too. I told you during that situation, I said, you have to honor yourself.
Right.
You have to,
Yeah.
I understand, you know, the somatics, but you have to honor yourself in a situation. You're not a teenager, you're not a kid, you know, and you've got other individuals in your family. So you disruption, you know, that's key. And it can come through anyone, you know, just because someone is family or blood or anything. It may be everything is not heaven sent. It may be something that's coming there to cause chaos and you recognize it and it's protection. You're protecting yourself and your family. So,
Absolutely.
and he got what he wanted. He was
Right.
fulfilled well. It's not like he left without the knowing of you. He saw you, he spent time with you and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
it was done the way God intended it to be done, I believe.
And it was so wonderful to have both your friendships, you and Sheila, during that time, because it was a very confusing time for me. And but you're right, I had to give myself grace. And just like Sheila was saying, some people just outright deny and don't want, you know, to even acknowledge. I didn't do that. I did bring him into my life. I did introduce him to his grandchildren. I did introduce him to my extended family. You know what I mean?
Right.
And some people don't get to go, they don't get to do that. Just like she was saying, she didn't get to meet her in person. So I felt like I had, you know, it may not be that fairy tale ending, like I said, was on those shows all those years ago, right? But it was the part of my story and it brought closure. I know it brought closure to him. I know it did. It brought closure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Do y'all remember back in the day when Sally, Jesse, Raphael used to have the shows and adopted people used to be on there? That was like the calm, like, oh, we're the families are reunited. And then they came up with the what's the other guy that would have the shows about adoption? Maury Povich. You are the baby daddy. I
Oh
mean, like
yeah.
the opposite.
Right.
That was horrible. I watched it though.
I don't know if you guys ever saw the episode. I think it might have been Mari, or it might have been Jerry Springer. I don't know, but it was Chili from TLC when she was reunited with her biological daddy and her sister.
I
Do you remember
do
that?
remember that.
Yeah,
I
Mhm.
I
do.
do. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, it happens. It's not something that, you know, is an anomaly. It's something that, you know, does happen. And, you know, everybody is not cookie cutter experience. You know, you react to what's best for you. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
have to
yeah,
honor yourself.
yeah, because there's so many different scenarios that could go on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a believer, it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you."
That's right.
This,
So,
this.
regardless of the situation, you know,
Mhm,
God doesn't make any mistakes,
Nope.
mhm, mhm.
and you know, everybody is placed on a path,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you just have
Oh,
to set
Have
it
that
and
faith.
forget it. Just have that faith and don't
Yep.
look back.
Well, you
right.
know what? I mean, I remember, I think the reason this got shared, I remember talking to Krissy and she had watched the Today Show, right? And there was this woman and she was an actress, right? Her name is
Yeah.
Lynn Moody. And she had given up a child and they were reunited much later in life. And it was such a touching moment. And I remember Krissy saying that she was crying, she was tearing up. And I told her, I said, you know, the funny thing about it is not funny, but the ironic thing about it is that is a cousin of that cousin that I was telling you about earlier that we got close to. That was
Yeah.
his cousin.
Wow.
And when she
Oh
was
wow.
pregnant with that baby that she gave up, she stayed with my aunt. And then I wound up sharing my story with Krissy, and she was like, "What?" And I
Right.
showed her the picture
I'm already
in that
emotional.
Mexican restaurant. I showed her the picture, and she was like, "Adrienne, you have to write a book. You have to write a book." I said, "No,
Oh my God, write a book about it.
it was just crazy the way that all happened." And she said, "What?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, yeah." And so yeah, it is divinely what.
And I think before I went on my mission, like to find people, I
Mhm.
used to watch shows like that, and I would get so emotionally attached. Like,
Mm,
Right.
mhm.
Right.
That's how Krissy sounded that day. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's what I
"Calm
was. I
down."
was a mess. I was like, oh my God, because I was already crying from because this woman is somebody that I grew up as a little girl
Right.
watching. Was it That's
Oh
My
yeah.
Mama? And
wow.
then
Oh
I would
yeah.
watch her like, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. And I
Mhm.
saw her on, like the Jeffersons. So when I saw her on the Today Show, I was like, oh my God, I was so emotional and full. So I shared it with Adrienne. So then that's when she felt like, okay, I'm gonna share this with her. And girl, it was a mess. I was a hot mess.
That is funny. That is
You,
too
Sheila,
funny.
I had to tell her. I said, "Chrissy, calm down,
Right.
okay?" She's like,
And I
"What?
could just see it.
What?"
I'm calm.
Oh my God, what? Are you serious? Oh my God.
But
All right.
Adrienne, we forgot to tell a part of the story
What?
that we're still not sure of. That
Oh,
people
oh, you tell her. You tell
in
her, Sheila.
my family that
Mm,
are connected to you and related to you. So
mhm.
we possibly could be related. So we just go ahead and claim it anyway. We
Right.
relate.
I
Like
just
that.
call her my cousin because she's
Exactly.
like, "That's it. You're my cousin."
Yep.
And but you never know. I mean, I told you about all these different connections throughout my story that were
Yes.
insane. I mean, when I was telling my
Yes.
uncle about
Uh-huh.
my cousin having the same name, he started to think I was getting catfished. Okay.
Yeah.
Seriously. So it could be, I mean, I shared just for people who are listening, I've shared some of the names and the lineage that because I guess my uncle, my birth uncle, had done what Sheila did throughout ancestry and traced back to 1400s actually. And some of the names that I was telling Sheila about, and she recognized some of the names. So it could very well be. It very
Oh yeah.
well could be. But we just call each other cousins just because it probably is true anyway. So
Yeah. In real life. In real life.
yeah, in real life.
'Cause,
Period.
whew, yeah, period.
Oh my gosh.
So what
So
would
we
you
give you
tell?
the third degree on adoption today, for
Right,
real.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But
Sheila,
it's
what would
good
you
to be able to share our stories and to give a perspective because again, so many people have gone through so many different things and different reactions or, you
Yeah.
know, things to
right.
being adopted. So it's
Mhm.
good that both me and Adrienne had wonderful upbringings and
Mhm.
um, that we could share things and pass things along to our own kids that they'll remember forever.
Yep.
Right.
I'm sorry,
So
Chris, what were you about to ask me?
yeah, I was gonna ask you, what would you tell your younger self or another adopted girl or boy who's still
Uh,
trying to figure it out, you know, where they belong?
I think for everybody, the teenage years are the hardest years because you're just basically trying to figure yourself out. And if you
Mhm.
find out that you're adopted in the teenage years, you really just have a big question mark. But I would tell my younger self that, like, again, God doesn't make any mistakes. You're where you're supposed to be. And, don't take things for granted. Like, make the most of your life and don't dwell on things you have no control over.
Amen. Yep. Absolutely.
I want to thank you both for opening up today, you know, on our podcast. Like I said, I'm honored that you allowed me to ask you these questions and you were able to share your most intimate thoughts with the audience. Like I told you both, that you both need to write books and help others. There's someone out there that needs this story, and the podcast is the beginning. You know, you need to both write down, you know, your story and how you're feeling and how you felt now and your accomplishments. You're both accomplished women. You have outstanding children. And like I said, you know, it's not a sob story. You were chosen. You know what I'm saying? Adoption ain't a sob story. You're a valiant winner in this situation. So I commend both of you. I love both of you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so listen, being adopted doesn't make you less than. These are my closing remarks. If anything, it means you were chosen twice, once by God and again by love. And that's power.
Your story doesn't look like anyone else's to be valid. Chosen, healed, and whole. That's the energy.
So I want to give a website for Adopt Us Kids.
Okay.
So www.adoptuskids.org. And there's so many sites out here that are now that people can go to find their adoptive parents or brothers and sisters or family members, and just don't give up hope.
Yeah, I've got another one too. The National Council for Adoption, NCFA, and their website is adoptioncouncil.org. And they're a nonprofit that promotes ethical adoption practices. They offer a directory to help prospective adoptive parents find licensed agencies and professionals. So you can check them out at adoptioncouncil.org.
Well, I want to thank you all for joining Third Degree Vibes again today. We welcome you and thank you. Share this podcast with others. We do appreciate it. We love you all. And until next time, have a wonderful day and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Keep being a blessing.
Period.
Period.